Passage about Elijah, how he pleaded to God against Israel. Lord, they have killed your prophets and torn down your altars. I am the only one left, and they're trying to kill me. And what was God's answer to him? I have reserved for myself 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So too, at the present time, there is a remnant chosen by grace. And if by grace, then it cannot be based on works. For if it were, grace would no longer be grace. What then? What the people of Israel sought so earnestly, they did not obtain. The elect among them did, but the others were hardened. As it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that could not see, and ears that could not hear, to this very day. And David says, may their table become a snare and a trap, a stumbling block and a retribution for them. May their eyes be darkened, so they cannot see, and their backs be burned forever. Amen. So I think, especially when talking about the remnant, the scripture that Paul made reference to is, remember, Elijah versus the prophets of Baal, story in 1 Kings, where he made a challenge. Of course, they had to set up an altar, put their sacrifice on the altars, and of course, the prophets of Baal had to call out to Baal to come and ignite the altar, and the sacrifice on the altars. And of course, you know the story. There was busy screaming and shouting and hailing and wailing from dawn right through until dusk. And of course, Elijah was like, come on guys, really? Shout louder, maybe he's asleep. Wake him up. And they went on to cut themselves and were bleeding. And then came Elijah's turn. And what happened? He put everything, he prepared everything. And so he took gallons of water, poured water until everything was soaked. And we just pray and say, God, now's your turn. That's my paraphrase. Okay, that's my paraphrase. Like, God, you got this. And so what happened? Fire came and consumed everything. Right. So this, and after that, after this, everything, he ran away. Because Jezebel said, what? I'm gonna kill you. And then he ran away. Come on, he just called God to bring fire down, and then the queen said, I'm going to kill him, and he runs away. Elijah sometimes, But anyway, he's complaining to God. He's like, God, I'm the only one. They're trying to kill me, mama. And God says to him, but don't worry, I've reserved myself. How many? 7,000 who did not bow the knee to Baal. And so Paul's making this reference about this. And he goes on and says, so too in the present time, just as it was then, so this time also, there is a remnant. And especially that word remnant, this is where it comes, chosen by grace. Now, it's very interesting because the word remnant, lema, the noun comes from actually the verb lepo. That means what? To leave behind. Right, I want you to pause and think about this. Right, it comes from, the verb means what? To leave something behind. Now usually when you leave something behind, what do you leave? What do you leave it behind?
To prepare something.
To?
Prepare something.
Alright, to prepare something, and what else? If you leave something behind it. What's that?
Things you don't want.
The things you don't want. Also like borrow. Take the things you want and leave the things you don't want.
Usually throw it away.
Usually like throw it away. So this is why even the word remnant is so interesting, especially from the verb, because it means to leave something behind. Now, of course,
there in the ancient world there were no trash collection services, so you just leave it behind.
That's the thing. That's true, because things were just messy. But you see, so this is very interesting because when you say that the remnant, if you have like a direct translation, it means the leftovers or the rejects. Now, this is very interesting because it means what? Those who are thrown out, the silegi. You see, that's basically what it means. The silegi, the trash, left behind. Left behind by whom? Well, if we, okay, we'll spiritualize it. All right, it's left behind by whom? By the world, because the world finds these people to be trash. The ideas, the kind of worldview they operate. What is this thing of, God and everything? We don't believe in that. Just go away. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Especially in the modern world. So anything you bring God. I remember reading the news. What is it? I can't remember whether it be CNN or something. But basically, one of the soldiers in the U.S. was making an address. Was talking, and I can't remember what the topic was. And so he mentioned God in his address. And what they do? They cut the mic. So they prevented him from speaking any further because he mentioned the name God. You go, wait, what? Yeah. In a religious, tolerant culture, people are so intolerant of Christians as well. Everything are becoming more and more hostile.
The legal system is tolerant, the culture is not.
Yeah, the culture is very much not. So this is what we talk about, the left behind, the rejects. Those things that the world considered to be trash. But those are the important things. That's why in Paul, the scripture of the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, the most important stone, which is Jesus Christ. And so here it is very important because the remnant are those left behind by the world. They're rejects of the world because they will not what? Conform to its standard. They will not just simply follow the world's standard of what the world thinks is right and wrong, good and evil. When the world says everything is true, but then we say, no, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Right? When everything is centered on, even the way people raise their children, Christian ethos are even challenged in schools and cultures and everything. If a young girl says, no, I will not, I'm keeping myself for my husband, same thing with the boy. And guess what? They're being laughed at. They're called rejects. There it is. Simply by following the Christian ethos. So here it is. Those who are rejected by God, simply because we will not what? Conform to the standard of this world. But also the remnants is like those very people who are rejected are the ones who are very special to God. Because are those taken, in fact, those who are rejected, the process of rejection is also a process of God taking out of the world by God, so that to show that we belong to Him. So you can say it's sort of a double thing. The process of rejection, by the world is a process of acceptance by God, of taking out. And this is something very important, because it is something, that means it is God's action that He already prepared beforehand. This is what's going to happen. And so those who are rejected by the world is because they are mine. So that is what we call the remnant, those who do not conform, simply because they have the mind and heart of Christ. They don't just simply follow what the culture says, what the contemporary culture says, but rather follows what the Bible says. You see? So, I think I saw this picture on the internet. I sort of Googled rejects. And I looked at different pictures and everything else, but this picture of a group of children. One boy is left there, sitting there by himself, and everyone else are going around busy looking at the quote-unquote reject and laughing at him, right? And of course the boy is feeling quite sad and depressed. Everyone is laughing at his expense. Why? Because he's different. He thinks differently, he acts differently, and everything. So they are laughing, they're enjoying at his expense. And when I saw this picture, and I thought, wow, that is how many Christians are nowadays. The world is laughing at our expense. And I remember even 2 days ago, I was watching a documentary about the musician Prince. Do you know him? So he passed away, I think, in 2016. Yeah. But when I was listening to this, to the documentary, and when one of his friends, closest friends, was talking about his life, and towards the end, because he did all this rock music and everything else, some words were pretty, and how towards the end of his life, he turned to God. And so his friend, who was talking, basically ridiculed the idea of him finding God. And I went, wow. So that is how it is, because you find those when we embrace God's truth, someone embraces God's truth, the first initial response is always to ridicule, to make fun of somebody, to say, this person is really cuckoo in the head. Why do they believe in such things? And go into full mode of ridiculing and making fun of people. So even when you look at the picture, this is what it means to be a remnant. You stand out. People don't see you as really part of them, because your thinking is different, your actions are different, your words are different. You see? And so, because they just simply don't understand God's truth in God's word, it's quite difficult for them to understand you. So what we do then, do we do? Do we simply change and become like them, or do we simply continue to stand out? So this is very interesting, because even with everything, Paul sees, of course, particularly the Jewish Christians as the remnant of God, because they are God's children. And why? Because, let's read. He says, because, the second point, because they embraced the Messiah who came to fulfill the law and the prophets. Because they embraced Christ. And because they follow the message of grace, which is different from the tradition of works that the Pharisees were pointing out to. And of course, they said Jerusalem was a perfect stage to display this. Perfect stage of displaying this sort of the difference between these two communities and how the Christians simply stood out. Because on the one hand, you have what? You have the traditional Jewish religion. And on the other hand, you have what? The Christian community. And these two communities clashed. They clashed. Religiously, they clashed. Politically, they clashed. The Jewish people saw the Christians as the cancer in the community that ought to be rooted out. And so the Christians were seen as what? The rejects. They're seen as the rejects in the community, the cancer in the community. And of course, the next point is very. Let's read it. It says, "The remnant are the people of saw themselves as the real Israel within Israel." So generally, you have the broader Israel. You see, the broader of Israel, and so when you have the people of God and the kingdom of Israel, but they saw themselves as the real Israel, the real people of God, because they really embraced what? The good news of Christ. Now, as I said previously, as I said, you have Jerusalem. It was at the perfect stage of showing the difference between the two communities. Remember Peter and John, after they healed the crippled man by the gate, right, of the temple, right? And it says, "Silver and gold I have none, but in the name of Jesus, stand up and walk." And what happened to them? Were they embraced? Were they like, "Wow, congratulations, wow, this is wonderful, tell us the good news"? No, what happened? They were persecuted. They were brought in front of the Sanhedrin. And they were told never to preach about Jesus again. If you read the book of Acts, the stoning of Stephen, this really shows sort of the difference between the Christians and the Jewish community and what they viewed them as the cancer. That's why even Saul, later known as Paul, he went and they arrested Christians and were put to death to try to take this cancer out. Paul as well, stoned. By who? Gentiles? Well, the people who instigate everything, what are the Jews? Stoned, but yet survived.
Well, what goes around comes around.
What goes around comes around. God, you show exactly what you read. But here it is. I want you to think about this, and I want you to think, how do people around you look at you? Especially those who are not Christians. Think about this. But above all, the main thing is, it's not just how the world looks at us, but rather how do we respond to the world? How do we respond to the world? And the only way we ought to respond is simply through love. That's it. That's it. That's it. Through love. You know, it's like, remember the song, Light of the World, you stepped out into darkness. Light of the world, you stepped out into darkness. And there's a thing about the light stands out in darkness. That's what it is. The light simply stands out in the darkness. And so, not to conform to the standard basically means that we ought to set a new standard of how things ought to be. So in other words, even for us, we must set the standard. What happens when someone says bad things about you? What do? You must set the standard to show how things ought to be. React in love and kindness, not in vengeance and anger. What happens, even especially the whole thing about the new generation, of keeping themselves pure until marriage? That is what we need, especially for the generation. We need to teach the young people that. You see, nowadays, if you talk about no, keep yourself, abstain, keep yourself, the world is like, why? Why? You must give them condoms. You're like, come on. Abstain. That is God's standard. Right. In marriage, the standard of what? Husband, love your wife. Right? Maintaining that standard. Of family, of wife, the relationship between husband and wife, and children and parents. Sort of maintaining that high standard of creating a good and happy society. Happy and healthy family creates a happy and healthy society. You see, not money or economy or whatever. Family is the foundation of society. So when family fails, then that's it. You can have good business and everything, but once the family unit fails, then society fails. That's it. Amen?
Amen.
So this is sort of a challenge for us. Paul saw himself, the Jewish people as tyrannic. But also, Gentiles who did not conform to the pagan religions of the day, the Romans who chose to worship God and not the cults of the Caesars and everybody, they stood out and were persecuted for that. They died for that, for being the rejects. But yet, to be the reject of the world is to be the chosen of God. That's a beauty. That's like the two sides of the coin. We're the reject of the world, yes. But on the other hand, we are the chosen of God. Oh, I'm special. That's the best thing. I'm saying, and coming to the words of Paul and John, when you say, well, we would rather listen to God and not man. Because even Jesus says, what benefits a man who gains everything but loses his soul? But rather, what? We should simply seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, even if the world simply does not understand. Simply is to stand up like the light in the darkness. I say, that is the best. Any questions, any comments, any points you wish to point to look at? Have you ever considered yourself as a reject? It's a bit harsh, isn't it? Like, wow, I'm a reject. You know? But it's another to be proud of being a reject. I mean, it's like a whole different. I mean, people call it, craziness. But to say, well, the world doesn't like me, it's okay. And to be even comfortable and happy about that. You know, it would be great if we were loved and embraced, but not always. Not always. Even some so-called Christian countries, the culture is quite different. What statistics say and what is in culture is quite different. South Africa, according to statistics, 80% Christian. Culture, oh Lord have mercy. Because when people come and say, what religion are you? They say, oh, I'm Christian because my parents are Christians. Some people say they're Christians, but yet they've never been to church for the past 10 years. So how Christian is South Africa? In reality, I don't think 80% even comes close. I would say in culture, 50% makes it a very sort of normal standard. You see? So that's a whole thing of not being deceived and say, wow, South Africa, a Christian nation. No, not really. We're culturally conservative, yes. But when it comes to Christian, not many. Really, it's not many. You see? So people would rather go to parties than everything than go to church. You say barbecue parties or church, barbecue party or church. For most people, that's not even a choice to make food. But it's all about worldview. Any questions? Any comments you wish to make? Now, what about Korea? Korea, it says, I think, statistically, plus minus 30% Christian, I think. Is it more than that?
I think the Christian 30%, including Shincheonji, Yehovah's Witness, and some others. Yeah, they are all Christian.
Yeah.
They can be categorized as Christian.
So basically, any group that says we believe in God and we have a Bible.
Yes. Except, in case of Roman Catholic, they say I'm Roman Catholic.
Oh, okay.
So, I think the Christians, I think that include all of them.
So Shincheonji and Hananim, 교회 and all those, also included in the statistics.
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. That's very, very interesting. So, according to your estimate, what is the percentage of Christians? Rough estimation.
In Catholic, about 30%.
About 30% being
About
Catholic.
25%, 20% too. So
Okay. All right. And then, how many people, I mean, just in terms of statistics, I know it's sort of like throwing a number out there. How many people do you think are regular church-going Christians? How much percentage?
Less than 10%?
Less than 10%. Yeah, I think you might be right.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah, I think you might be right. You might be right. Yeah, because Sunday, I think, it depends. Yes. Some people are like, oh, I'm so tired. I've been working a whole week and things like that. Right. But there's the whole thing of having a more realistic view. Someone's like, hey, Christianity is growing or not, but it's also a question of what type of Christianity is it. And also the reality of those who say they're Christians, how many are really sincere, dedicated Christians? How many will say, well, I'm a Christian because I'm not Muslim or I'm not Hindu? You see? So statistics, they're kind of deceiving sometimes. You see? So it's one of the, but at least for us, the main challenge is that we ought to indeed stand out far and above, keep the Christian ethos, Christian teachings, live it out. And yes, we may get ridiculed, we may get rejected, but it does not matter. Because at the end, when everything is said and done, and when people are standing in front of God, and someone go, oh, so they were right. You know, someone said, well, what if there's no God? Well, the Bible teaches how to live a good life. You see? So it really doesn't matter. But the question is, if there is a God and you don't believe in Him, there's no turning for you. And that's it. You know? And there's no, oh man, there's a thing of just regret. If only. For me, I have no regrets. None at all. Amen. Right, shall we pray?